Self-love, if there is such a thing, it's actually about you trying to think your way out of the ego trap. So it's about basically saying, listen, maybe you can do it and maybe you can't do it. And if you can't do it, we're just going to have to live with that. You're good enough for whatever it is that you can accomplish is going to have to be good enough. The fact that is, quote, self-love. Okay?
Welcome everyone to the Vegan Posse Self-Love series, which is dedicated to expanding our tenderness, affection, curiosity, and general delight in one very important animal, ourselves. As many of you know, I'm currently working on a companion guide to my novel, Marrying Myself, which will be a sort of self-love playbook. So in the process of creating this Marrying Myself companion guide, I realized I had a wealth of wisdom in the previous guests I've had on the show, and I decided to invite some of them back to talk about what self-love means to them. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome back psychologist Dr. Doug Lyle, the evolutionary psychology expert who helped coin the term the pleasure trap for the hidden force that undermines human health and happiness. Dr. Lyle's YouTube video, How to Lose Weight Without Losing Your Mind, has been viewed by over 2 million people. And for me personally, it helped explain what I hadn't managed to figure out in over a decade in a 12-step program for compulsive overeating. So Dr. Lyle, welcome back to the Vegan Posse. As you may recall, I start out regular Vegan Posse episodes by asking people if they're ready for the ride of their life. But for this special series, I would like to ask, are you ready for the love of your life?
I'm not, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I've been ready for the love of my life for 50 years, and she hasn't shown up yet. So whatever.
Okay, fair enough. Some just warranted skepticism. That's quite fair. I would expect nothing less. So now you're a very rational, analytical person, and some of our mutual friends like Chef AJ were a bit skeptical when they heard that I would be talking to you about something as touchy-feely as self-love. So what's your take on self-love? Is it a fluff concept, or is it something we can psychologically identify in a scientific manner?
We can absolutely identify it. If we're going to try to get any real insight into such a concept, we have to begin with Aristotle, which is warning us to define our terms. So it's not going to make any sense to talk about things or to discuss them unless we actually understand what the other person is talking about, because it's through words are the only way that we can try to get precision in our communication. So on the one hand, from part of how it is that people are thinking about the concept of self-love, it's ludicrous, okay? From other ways that they're thinking about it, it is legitimate. So let's walk through the difference between the ludicrous and get to the legitimate. Okay, so from the ludicrous side, you can't the process of love. We need to translate that into a feeling of something that we value. So that's what love is. Love is a feeling that arises out of a computation in our minds that something is valuable to us. And the reason why things are valuable is they increase our statistical likelihood of gene survival. Okay. So this is a little problematic. In other words, very, very few psychologists on earth know this. The first person that I knew that explained this was a man by the name of Victor Johnson, professor out somewhere in western Colorado or something. But it is a deep realization that the ex-wife of Randy Thornhill, who is a first-rate evolutionary psychologist, she herself is an evolutionary psychologist, and this dawned on her one day in the early 1990s. Okay, so this is not a concept that is well understood even today. I think very few professors, if you went to UC Berkeley right now and talked to the top professors in psychology, I don't know that anybody there knows this. Okay, but and some people that are very high level have argued with Victor Johnson about this, that nobody can actually contradict the logic, that all feelings, from the pinprick of a finger to an animal feeling cold, to an animal feeling lusty, to an animal feeling hungry, to an animal feeling trapped, feelings are really complicated, and they are highly precise in terms of what it is that they're attempting to accomplish. You don't see something extra on an oak tree that's there for no reason. If you have a big old branch there, that branch is there for a reason. It's there to actually increase the statistical likelihood of the DNA that built the oak tree surviving into succeeding generations. That is the purpose of the branch. That's the purpose of the leaves. That's the purpose of the acorns. That's the purpose of the roots. That's the purpose of the color of the leaves. Everything about that thing is all about, there isn't anything that isn't about that. So when it comes to animal behavior is similarly efficient, and it must be, because evolution penalizes any extra characteristic that we put onto a life form, plant or animal or fungi. In other words, anything that's extra on there that is not there, it costs energy to produce it. And so therefore, it must be paying for itself in terms of genetic currency. And the currencies are, you increase the likelihood of the animal surviving or the animal's reproductive success. Those two things can be different things. So you could be a mother that sacrifices yourself so that your 4 children survive. You die, but you increase the likelihood of your genes surviving. So Victor Johnson, I believe, was the first person to crisply explain that all feelings are nothing other than the translation into an analog form of gene survival probabilities. So that means all feelings, they're engineered super carefully. So when you stub your toe, it doesn't hurt in your ear. Okay, they're super careful. If you see something that is sexually very useful for reproduction, you don't feel let's see, a bitterness in your mouth. Okay, you feel lust. Okay, you feel drawn towards it. So feelings are the translation into an experienced currency that is an attempt to orient the organism towards opportunities and threats in the environment, towards things that are valuable or disvaluable. And if they are neither, then you feel neutral towards them. So with respect to almost all of the environment, you don't feel anything very powerful. But towards certain things in the environment, you feel very powerfully towards. So if you're a rabbit, you feel very powerfully drawn towards carrots and other rabbits. If you are a rabbit, you feel terrified of foxes. So when you see a deer, you don't think much about it. It doesn't have a particularly significant impact on you emotionally. So your emotional responses, as well as your sensory responses, are actually translations of gene survival probabilities. So if you're a rabbit and you're in heat or whatever they are, then you are feeling drawn towards another rabbit, for sexual activity, in order to reproduce the DNA. There's no other reason you feel those things. Okay? It's not there for fun. It's there for a specific orienting mechanism in order to increase the statistical likelihood of the genes being passed on. That is the purpose of the feeling. Okay? Animals that pair bond will have warm, protective feeling towards a partner. Those aren't there for fun. Those are part of the process of those two people or two other animals gaining trust and acceptance in their gene choices that they're making, etc. So the point that I'm making here is that all feelings are here for a reason, and they are there to orient the animal towards its environment. So if you love something, it's something that you are moving towards in order to get closer to the value that it affords you. So you might love the sun, so you move out from under the shady tree into the sun because you love the feeling that comes, because it's a positive sensation that indicates that you're going to increase your statistical likelihood of survival. Okay, you might love the voice of another person because you're designed by nature to actually be analyzing the gene quality of the individual that's singing by the nature of their voice. So there's certain voices you love and voices that you don't love. That's because those are gene survival, those are gene mutational estimates that are going on in the system. Sounds incredible, but it's true. Same way that emperor penguins, thousands of them waddling around each other in the Antarctic, are looking each other over for indications of gene quality to mate. Okay, so it's like, God, they all look the same to us, but the truth is they aren't the same. And each of them has preferences that cause lust reactions or rejection reactions. So from one standpoint, loving yourself doesn't make any sense at all, because you can't increase your likelihood of gene survival. You can only love things outside of yourself. Okay? The whole point of love is an orientation towards something that is valuable. In order to consume it, you can love cherries, or you can try to get to the DNA inside of it if it's a mating partner, or you can love your child because your DNA is in it, or you could love a pet that is because that pet is tripping a parental mechanism inside of you as a domesticated animal. And it has sounds that has made it childlike, okay, which is exactly how they've evolved and been selected. So you love things outside of yourself. So loving yourself, there would be no evolutionary reason why you would engineer a feeling towards loving yourself. It actually doesn't make any sense. Okay? So there right away, and when I think about loving myself, it has never even occurred to me, and I don't even think anything of it. And so in 64 and a half years, that concept makes no sense to me whatsoever. Okay? The concept of loving an apple tree, that makes sense. The concept of loving a waterfall, that makes sense. The concept of loving my cat, that makes sense. The concept of loving a piece of licorice, that makes sense. All of those things make sense. Loving myself makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Okay. So from that point of a very fuzzy version of that, when people talk about learning to love myself, it's like, well, I can't learn to love myself because that's actually an evolutionary impossibility. So now but the truth is, if we force people to get clearer about what it is that they are saying, we're going to get to something that does make sense. Okay. So now let me explain what it is that I think makes sense. What makes sense is that you can have, for example, feelings of pride. That is a different word now. And that word is an attempt to describe and explain and communicate a highly specified feeling that human beings are capable of having. Okay? So pride is a feeling it comes from a feeling of some kind of achievement that has taken place. So we can be proud of our son who has done something well. So it's a feeling that cues us that some gene survival probability is increased. It's a positive feeling. Okay. Now, it's interesting that you could be proud of yourself. It's kind of a bizarre thing. Like, how would that have been engineered and why? So whenever we have any feeling, we have to look back through the lens of evolution, because in the same way that if we look at an oak tree and all of its features, we understand that every single one of those features comes from a long history of millions of years of genetic selection, that it's looking for things that are extremely valuable when it comes to increasing the statistical likelihood of gene survival. So feelings are super complicated to engineer. There's all kinds of feelings that you don't have. In fact, you have almost none. So you don't have the feelings of a female chimpanzee looking at male chimpanzees. You don't have those feelings. If you look at male chimpanzees, you don't feel lust and you don't feel analysis of their attractiveness. You don't feel the lust that bees feel towards pollen. In other words, of almost all of the feelings that exist on the planet inside of animal brains, you feel basically none of them. So what do you feel? You only feel the feelings that you have neuroengineering that are designed by nature to cue you as a human animal, that to tell you when there are features in the environment that are positive or negative for you and to what degree. So if you're a stranger in a strange land and then you see somebody that you know, you'll have a feeling of relief and attraction and happiness, because you will feel like, ooh, I just increased my likelihood of gene survival. Somebody else here speaks English. Okay. So you have every single one of your feelings, from a thorn bush picking your finger, to a toenail that's getting ingrown into your system, to a digestive difficulty because you ate some rotten pizza. Every single feeling that you have is designed by nature to cue you how to respond to your environment. So why would we have a feeling called pride? It's an interesting feeling. Okay. You can also have a feeling of self-disgust. That's an interesting feeling. So now we're getting somewhere when it comes to talking about loving yourself. We can tell that if we are feeling self-disgusted, we are actually feeling as if we want to walk away from a part of ourselves or be disgusted with ourselves. That's curious. Disgust is a very specific emotional response that's been has its evolutionary history in rotten food. Okay, pretty clear that that's true. A professor named Paul Rosen spent his career on this. But if you think about this and you look at the facial expressions of people when they have a disgust reaction, if you bring something to your nose and you smell it and it smells bad, you'll do this. Okay, and what that is a disgust reaction. The face that we recognize in others as disgust is actually a mechanism to defend you against bacterial contamination. So rotten food, you want to close your eyes, because your eyes are a source of potential infection. You want to close your nostrils, which means you will need to scrunch your face up, and you want to do this, okay? And you want to turn your head away, okay? It's going to turn out that very same reaction will take place when people look at people that they find very sexually unappealing. Okay, they'll do this. The feeling they have is disgust. Okay, so the curious thing is that people can have a feeling of disgust towards themselves. Well, that's interesting. How do you get away from yourself? How is that even possible? And the answer is that human beings have evolved two different sources of feedback that come in terms of their how they feel about themselves as a result of their environmental circumstances. One of them is going to be what I'm going to call esteem reactions. So that's when other people give us positive or negative feedback. Now, that's going to turn out to be the most powerful emotional reactions that you're ever going to see in a human. That's because other people wind up being, what they think of us winds up being the most important determining factor in whether or not our DNA will survive. So whether it's hot or cold is important, whether we're hungry or not is important. These things will, hot and cold and, safety from predators and food, and whether or not we're in a disgusting smelling environment, all of these things have important implications for how it is that people feel. But the most important thing that will dominate the human emotional your existence in your time on Earth will be, what do other people think of you? Now, ironically, psychologists and gurus will say, well, we shouldn't care about what other people think. Don't care what they think. Well, that is impossible. You are a social animal, and the most important determining factors of whether or not you will survive and reproduce will be what other people think of you. They either choose to mate with you or they do not. Okay? They either choose to trade with you or they do not. They choose to befriend you or they do not. Other people will be making choices about the exchange processes and trades that will go on between us and them. And we will be making those same decisions on them. We will be judgmental of them and deciding that one's not good enough, that one is good enough. Okay. So these are competitive market phenomena that is happening. When we are accepted by people that we find acceptable for some kind of trade, there is a pleasantness in our nervous system that tells us that we just increased our likelihood of gene survival, as if we were cold and we moved into warm sunshine. It is exactly the same process. It is a signaling device to tell us that we've increased our gene survival probability. So when other people give us good feedback, that is a good feeling, okay? Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because we have to know that they've given us good feedback, that it's as a result of our winning a competitive process inside their head against our relevant competitors. If we don't believe that they actually have honestly assessed the situation because we've cheated, okay, or that we know that they have not seen the competition yet, then we are not excited about that feedback. We're only excited about that feedback when we believe that is evidence that we've actually won a trade opportunity. Okay. We don't necessarily have to win a trade opportunity. We can be getting positive feedback that indicates that we will win future trade probabilities. So if I go to some new school and a nice looking girl kind of flirts with me, and then a second one flirts with me, I may not be interested in either one of them, but I'm excited about the positive feedback because it indicates my competitive standing. Okay. So, but whatever it is, the reason we're having a feeling is it's a reflection of our competitive standing with respect to trade processes with people, or with respect to our non-human environment. In other words, you can have terrifying feelings of being in the woods and hearing a big twig snap. Okay? So your feelings are always reactions to a translation of gene survival probabilities as they work their way through your very complicated neurological system and give you this qualitative feeling of positive or negative. Loving something is because that something, according to your genetic code's ability to compute it, it's telling you that has high importance to your gene survival probability. That is what it would be, okay? It could be you love a sweater at Macy's because the value of it and how good it looks on you are going to increase your gene survival probability because you're going to look good to other people, and therefore you're going to get compliments, etc. So everything is going to translate down to gene survival probability. You can't have a feeling that would be engineered in evolution if that were not true. Okay, so you don't have a feeling inside your head that impacts you significantly when Saturn goes behind Mars. That's because it's not an important event for human beings, and therefore it's not going to impact human beings. So that's happened for millions of years, and it does. Human beings have no machinery for that. Now, there's a second source of feelings that has to do with our a social psychological phenomenon, but it exists inside the person, independent of feedback from other people. This is going to be what we're going to call the internal audience and its actions. So the internal audience has gone by many names across the whole course of the history of philosophy. One of the more sophisticated versions of this was Sigmund Freud's superego. Okay, in cognitive therapy today, they would call it the internal critic. But human beings live their lives in an interesting way, with essentially an internal observer watching ourselves. This is a very complicated set of equipment that undoubtedly does not exist in a house cat or a dog. So it's a bizarre thing that we would have essentially an audience watching us while we behave. It's curious to try to figure out why that you would have that. This has been an impenetrable mystery until you think things through from the source of evolution. Evolution now it starts to make sense. So sometime in the last 5 million years, the proto-humans got sophisticated enough that actually we know about 2 million years ago they started to live together in groups. So what's going to happen in groups, there's too much to explain here about what must have transpired, but the group now becomes effectively a tribe. So it's a group of people that are going to defend each other and aid each other's ability to survive and reproduce. Question is, why would you spend any energy to help anybody else survive and reproduce? Aren't you out for yourself? And the answer is you are out for yourself. But there's things that you can do better in a group context than you can do by yourself. So you can't pull the ticks out of your back as well by yourself as if somebody else does it. So it's going to turn out that human beings develop extraordinary cooperation. And it's the hallmark of who it is that they are. And the very fact that you have language tells you that you evolved this language word by word in order to be able to make deals and to educate each other. So the group becomes, getting kicked out of the group is a catastrophic loss of likelihood of survival, reproductive success. So human beings desire by nature to make sure they don't get kicked out of the group. The problem is that the group has opportunities in it for us to grab and take at the expense of members of the group to our own personal benefit, if we can get away with it. In other words, steal their stuff. Okay, so somebody's been collecting berries all day long. She's got a whole leather sack full of them, and she's not looking, and she's gone off to the river. Maybe I'm going to take a big handful of them. Okay. So the question is, what would stop me from doing that? And the answer is there better be some feeling mechanisms or computational mechanisms that tell you that if you do that, you're less likely to survive. Otherwise, there would be no reason to do it. So your dog doesn't have that problem. Your dog will steal from a little dog in 2 seconds. They don't even think about it. Okay? It's whatever I can get. But human beings absolutely do not do that. So human beings actually can imagine when they're about to steal that somebody behind a bush may be watching. And so they're going to have a feeling that's going to say, wait a second, you're doing the wrong thing. And if you get confronted on this, if somebody figures out that you do this, if you do this often enough, sooner or later, somebody's going to see it. And the problem is you're going to get kicked out of the village. And if you get kicked out of the village, your DNA is not going to make it on this planet. So human beings, in order to deal with the problems that would have been associated with the costs that are imposed by having your work exposed to other people's ability to steal it, they collectively evolve what Freud calls the superego, that he obviously didn't understand where it came from. But we can now look at this and see, this is how we get an internal audience. This is a conscience, okay? This is how you wind up with a morality system inside. Other animals don't have anything like it. They're effectively amoral. Okay, but a human being has this interesting characteristic where if it does something against the tribe, it can feel very guilty. Notice that it's delineated around tribe. If we wipe out the other guys and you kill 50 of them in a gunfight, you get the Congressional Medal of Honor for killing the other guys' tribes. Okay, but for your own tribe, if you aid and abet your own tribe, don't screw over your tribe. Okay, so we evolved an internal audience to watch us. And it turns out that when we do things well, our internal audience looks at it, it's as we have an emotional reaction as if other people are watching us. So when we do a really good job, our internal audience basically smiles and pats us on the back and gives us a feeling that we recognize as pride. Okay. This is also super useful in the problems that we have in competing within our own tribe or within human marketplaces for sexual partners, for friendships, and in trade. That very often, in order to compete effectively, we have to advertise. And so those advertises require rehearsals. So a young man that's trying to hit on a young lady just doesn't go up and say, wow, you're pretty. You know, you want to go take a walk? He will rehearse that process because other young men will be pitching themselves. And so that young man will rehearse that process when nobody is watching. So in his own mind's eye, he's going to be thinking about what he's going to be saying. And so he's going to be thinking it and imagining the scene, and he's going to be watching it as if he's a third party in his imagination. And so as he goes about those rehearsals, what happens is when his rehearsals go well, he can feel a sense of confidence and pride. That is a good display. That will be a good advertisement. That is effectively a cue inside the nervous system to tell him how he ought to be acting when the time comes to actually pitch his proposition. Okay, so someone who is working at something, they might be they're carving an elephant, and they're going to show it to the village, and they're trying to wow other people, and they're trying to get coconuts for it. As they're carving it, if they are doing a very good job and they can see that they're doing a very good job, they feel pride because the internal audience is watching them and saying you're doing a really good job. So the same thing happens if people are going to come to visit you and you clean your house really well. You effectively are watching yourself not skip over steps and do a sloppy job. And you are feeling a sense of pride that you are doing this thing extremely well, as if other people are watching. Okay? If you do a sloppy job, the internal audience watches you and says, well, you might get away with it that they may not see that you did a sloppy job, but we know you did a sloppy job. That is a warning to you that the actual audience that comes into your house may, in fact, be able to figure that out. So the sense of slightly less pride and a sense, if you do a really lousy job, you can feel disgusted. So it's going to turn out that there are things in this life that are so central to our ability to compete that if we do a lousy job at them, our internal audience will give us a never-ending stream of self-disgust. Okay? That's self-hate. That's the internal audience trying to send a message that says, you are doing a lousy job. You are wrecking our ability to survive and reproduce. The marketplace is not going to like what they see. Okay? When you go out there to try to compete for mates, friends, or trading partners, the outside world is going to give us the cold shoulder. We are not going to be able to get the kind of trades that we could get if you did a better job here preparing for your competitive problem. That's loving yourself. Loving yourself is the process of pride being generated by working very diligently in order to do the best possible job that you can to prepare yourself for the assessments of other people. Okay. So the interesting problem and a reason why the concept, this is the only possible reasonable mechanism by which I could discuss the concept of self-love. Right. So within there are very interesting, problematic, and important dynamics to understand. And that is that if we have the expectations of either other people or internally generated expectations of ourselves about our competitive abilities are actually beyond what is likely to be true. The brain can hold two hypotheses in it about your ability to compete. One of them is, I'm not very good. The other is, yes, I think I am, and I think I could succeed. You can have two different alternative hypotheses. In fact, you will have many. You'll have an entire spectrum of hypotheses. But what can happen is that if you try very hard and you fail, then you can lose status with either your internal audience or with outside people. So if other people expect you, if you're Simone Biles and people expect you to win the Olympic gold, you can feel that it is too dangerous to go do your best and take your chances with the market. So instead, you quit. Okay. When people quit, I've discussed this at length elsewhere. This is called the ego trap. So this is an instinctual method of calculation and motivational dynamics that takes place when a human being feels like they've got more to lose than they have to gain. If you feel like you would lose more status, this is a young hunter that gets lucky on his first hunt and everybody in the village thinks he may be a star. His next hunt, he doesn't even want to go on it. The reason is that when he comes back with no more than an average result this time, the girls that we're starting to think about, giving him a tumble are now going to back away. So he actually will look to delay and fiddling around and not go to the challenge. Same thing with a heavyweight champion that doesn't want to face the challenger. Okay. So the ego trap is a place that can generate tremendous self-loathing. That the person knows that they are actually not putting their best foot forward, they're not doing their best effort. They want to do that because they know it's necessary in order to put themselves in the best possible position to compete. But they have a tremendous countervailing negative force.
Yeah, your work on esteem really just explains so much for me about my own life. For one, it helped encapsulate my own life as one extended ego trap for a long time. But then it also helped me see how in some circumstances, the external esteem is at odds with my internal audience and my self-esteem. For instance, I always have a very hard time with yoga. And in New York City, I used to go to this very challenging yoga class. And I would get so anxious beforehand because I knew if I went, I would look kind of foolish. I would do a lot of things that didn't work and I wouldn't be impressive to anybody. But my internal audience valued my effort and was impressed that I tried and pushed my limits and challenged myself. So that was one very clear example that your work helped quantify for me. I saw that, oh, I go there, I won't get esteem from other people, but I do build my self-esteem. And so that's where it gets tricky, is when those two components are at odds.
Yes. So this is how the mind works. So the mind is trying to get us to positions with respect to our physical environment and our social environment that are ideal for survival and reproductive success. So that doesn't mean that we want to become Andre Agassi or Elvis Presley or Lady Gaga. Because, as I said, the system is designed by nature to be inherently realistic. Because if it wasn't, it would waste its time and energy on things that are impossible. Okay, it would be Don Quixote. Okay, so it isn't. So it's designed by nature to set goals for itself that are realistic. However, in setting those realistic goals, but not low, in other words, as high as you could realistically get, that's actually where the goals are set. So the problem with that is that ego traps are potentially evident there. So somebody thinks we can do it. We're probably not the only ones that think that we can do it, whatever it is. And so on the other hand, so therefore, if we do our very best, but it turns out that we fail, that the marketplace does not, in fact, react the way that we hoped, or our abilities don't turn out to be what we thought they could be. So either way, it turns out that we stand to lose something. Somebody is now going to think less of us because they thought that we could. Okay. And so that we're designed by nature to defend against those losses by procrastination and fiddling and excuse making, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So self-handicapping strategies. So this is, that is a tremendous source of self-loathing. That is, in fact, the most fundamental engine that there is of self-loathing. It's knowing that we ourselves are the saboteur. Okay. That's the thing that will basically eat away at the core of a person's happiness. It's super useful for people to understand how that ego trap dynamic works. Self-love, if there is such a thing, it's actually about you trying to think your way out of the ego trap. So it's about basically saying, listen, maybe you can do it and maybe you can't do it. And if you can't do it, we're just going to have to live with that. You're good enough for whatever it is that you can accomplish is going to have to be good enough. The fact that is, quote, self-love. Okay. I might call it something else, but the pride that people seek, because that's really what they're sniffing. That's what we're really talking about when we talk about self-love is pride. Okay. But sometimes in order to get to pride, we have to have a self-acceptance that says, I will live with whatever the results are. Okay. It takes some courage to be willing to give it your best effort and then put up with the fact that we may disappoint ourselves in what our abilities are, or we may disappoint the marketplace and other people, and we may lose esteem from that. That is the fundamental core of, quote, any self-love process that I can see. When you work diligently at something that means something to you, it doesn't mean you're going to achieve it. It means that you put yourself in a position to actually find out whether or not it was a worthwhile goal. It may turn out that it wasn't. Okay. So you believe that it was. That's why we had the energy. That's why it was the goal in the first place. That doesn't mean you must achieve your goals in order to be happy. That's insane and it is not true. Okay. But you must give your best effort for a period of time to discover what your native talent is. Okay. And then you can live with the result. So you're designed by nature to be inherently self-merciful, which is that if you do the very best job you can and it fails, you can live with that. What you will not live with is not having done your best at an important goal because you got ego trapped and intimidated out of doing your best, and you therefore fiddled around and didn't put your shoulder to the wheel, and then you get to basically choke on the dust of your own regret for the rest of your life.
Right. I came across some really interesting research on this subject. As you know, I'm in grad school for clinical mental health counseling, so I decided to do some academic research into this topic. And one of the interesting studies I came across was a study about self-respect. They tried to parse out self-respect as a distinct construct from other facets of self-esteem. And what they determined is that self-respect really is based on integrity and adherence to personal moral values and personal standards. And it's distinct from competence. So they found that people's competence at something, how good they were at something, that didn't affect their sense of self-respect as much as how they adhered to their own personal moral code and standards. And so I found that very, very interesting. And to me, that seems very consistent with your discussion of the ego trap.
Completely consistent. So this is where we're having an Aristotelian problem. And that is that there's words out there that are basically confusing and fuzzy to the population. And I understand that they are, and I understand I've got a problem because I'm using the words a little differently than other people. But there's a reason I'm doing that, because it's the only way that I can actually get this basically communicated accurately. So you could call self-respect and self-esteem exactly the same thing, as far as I'm concerned. In other words, those are the same thing. Self-confidence is entirely different.
Right, right.
Okay. So self-confidence is different than confidence in general, because you can have confidence that you believe that the stock market is going up. You can have confidence that you think that Steph Curry is going to hit a three-pointer tonight. That has nothing to do with you. Self-confidence is specifically your estimation of your ability to accomplish something. Okay. Self-confidence is an enormously important function of human happiness, because it's generally a reflection of where it is that you live your life with respect to competitive problems. So if you are someone that is sexually attractive, socially facile, athletically capable, beautiful voice, beautiful body, played the guitar, then you're walking around with a tremendous amount of self-confidence in the most important arenas of life. A hugely important arena is sexual competition. One of the things that's useless to me about almost all psychotherapy is that nobody is willing to actually go to the belly of the beast and talk about the fact that you're designed by nature as a gene replicator, and therefore sexual attractiveness is an enormously important feature of the psychology from within which you live your life. So we can see that there are people swaggering around with all kinds of self-confidence about the most important competitive processes that there are in life, and they don't work their ass off to do anything, or etc. Okay, so and self-confidence is being such an important feature of human happiness, and because of, i.e., what is going to be the market feedback? What do I believe that market feedback will be? Well, why do I believe that? Because I've had it forever. Okay, so that is a very important feature of how human beings live their life. But you don't have a lot of control over them. Okay, what you have control over is how diligently you work at the sub-processes of increasing your capabilities in competition. As you do that, your self-confidence will increase. Okay, there's nothing like self-confidence. It is a tremendously important feeling that says, I am in good shape with respect to my situation relative to market competition. If I'm a plumber and I'm really good, and I know I've got a really good reputation, and I know that I've got a tight operation, and I can outbid other people because they're not as smart about how it is that they manage their capital, then I'm confident, for God's sakes. Okay. And so that could be a very important feeling. Somebody that's really good at their work, that's another entire domain. Notice that those domains, the feeling of self-confidence is not general. It's highly fractionated. Are you self-confident about your ability to do math? Are you self-confident about your ability to dance? Are you self-confident about your ability to hit on the woman at the bar? Are you self-confident about your ability to make a speech? It's like, oh no, this is all fractionated. Okay. And so our job in life, because we are dealing with fractionated competitive problems, trying to reach for mates, friends, and trade, because that's true, there's plenty of work to be done on basically improving our performances, which means we have goals that we're inherently setting constantly and shifting them around as we look for the best deal to put our time and energy into. And our internal audience is watching our efforts. And when our internal audience looks at us and says, wow, you're flaking off and doing a crap job, then we feel bad about ourselves. That's self-loathing. Okay. It's with some of the problems that are really tricky, like for example, weight management. That's a very dicey problem because the solution to the problem forces you to go against your evolutionary history. And so it's like, man, that is an incredibly difficult problem. And so as a result, people fail. Almost everybody fails almost all the time at that problem. And as a result, they know it's devastating to their ability to compete in the attractiveness arenas. And so they have a tremendous potential self-loathing about that is devastating for their happiness. And of course, it's no surprise that what has arisen out of that extremely, really interesting and complicated and novel matrix of self-loathing and unhappiness has arisen, quote, the intuitive eating movement and love yourself at any size. It's like, yeah, that's other people trying to pat each other on the back and say, listen, you're still a good person, even though you're totally failing at this. And that's not a bad thing. But we have to understand that that's only going to be worth about 5% of the currency. You were designed by nature to know that you got to be putting your best foot forward in order to compete. If somebody tells you, listen, we are the losers, we can't compete, but we are still good people anyway. So we'll just completely foreclose that entire arena as if it means nothing. It's like, the problem with that is, well, you'll find that in a carefully done, sequestered self-help groups around that sort of thing, people will feel a little better for a little while. It's kind of, yeah, that's not nothing, but it's not the answer to the problem. The answer to the problem is understanding enough about the self-destructive dynamics that are being forged on you from a pathological environment, putting you into the pleasure trap. And then the seemingly simplicity of the solution, which causes you to be in an ego trap. Because you can't solve it, but it seems like you should be able to. And so as a result, the ego trap and the pleasure trap together on that particular dimension are devastating for people, which is what I was mostly thinking when we're talking about the pleasure trap being mastering the hidden force that undermines health and happiness. It's like, don't think that I wasn't knowing that in the middle of that was weight. Of course, there's other issues. There's health issues, there's drug addiction, there's all kinds of things in the pleasure trap. But of course, dead center of the pleasure trap, that's a book written about the modern process, totally pathological food environment that we find ourselves in. What is dead center at the middle of it? Systematic overeating as a result of an organism that was designed by nature and for an environment of scarcity and is now in an environment of artificial abundance. Okay? What is going to happen? People are going to systematically overeat the way any chicken or any hog will if you feed them unnatural food. What's going to happen then? They're going to be vastly less sexually attractive. What's going to happen then? They're going to live with an internal hell. That's the truth. Okay. So self-love for me means facing down and finding a way to accept the fact that we have our limitations at our ability to compete and to do the stepping stones necessary to be more successful. We may work very hard at something and fail. Okay. But in it, even if we fail, we will earn, i.e., self-respect or what I call self-esteem. Okay. We may not gain any confidence, and that we will have to live with the fact that we don't have it. We will have to live with the fact that we didn't gain then the positive feedback from the environment that we sought. Our minds will then turn to how it is, what else could we do? In other words, our job is to be earning that esteem, and it isn't to be continuing to beat some drum. Children walk away from desires to be professional athletes every day. Okay, so every boy has to go through this. 85% of boys in the 8th grade believe that they're going to be professional athletes. It turns out that 1 in 10,000 will be.
Recalibration.
So, recalibration is moderately painful. It's not nearly as painful as the self-destructive ego trap process that stops it.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Right.
So that's the story. So my story is, I tell the story of my mother growing up in rural Idaho in a little ghost gold mining town of about 40 people, 10 miles off a dirt road to this day. And she grew up there in a little town called Placerville. And her dad eked out a living as a barber, for God's sakes, in a town of 40 people. And went to a one-room schoolhouse that's still there, still stands. I saw the hut that my mom grew up in, and I mean, I'm telling you, that is unbelievably humble. That's late 18th, 19th century Appalachia. That's how my mother grew up. No running water, no plumbing, hole in the ground. That's it. Outhouse. No refrigerator. Forget it. But my mom said that her family was in and around the gold business. In other words, there was a gold mine there, the Hill de May. And that Perry Fairchild, her grandfather, had owned the Hill de May and had mined it for years and digging out a living, hardly making anything. And he sold it one day for apparently $100. Which was a pretty good chunk of money, maybe half a year's income or something. And whoever bought it sunk a shaft like 10 feet down and took out $6 million worth of gold.
I knew that was coming.
Now, and my mom, of course, it's just the old tale of the Fairchild clan, that this is what happened to Perry Fairchild, and that's why they aren't rich and didn't drive around in yellow Cadillacs and go to Boise. Okay. So but the story to that to me is that, that reminds me of self-esteem. It's like people's self-esteem can be being battered by the fact that they're in the ego trap. They're being told, oh, you're fine just the way you are. You should love yourself. It's like, no, you shouldn't. The truth of the matter is that you have an ego trap to face down. It feels dangerous to face it down and actually put out your best effort in the possibility that you will fail. But if you do that, one of two things is going to happen. One thing for sure will happen is that your internal audience will tell you, we respect the hell out of that effort. That will for sure happen. Then one of the following two things will happen. You will begin to succeed, at which point your confidence, your self-confidence will grow, and there's no feeling like it. Or you will fail, at which point your brain will see, we tried very hard, but we don't have the native capacities to do this. And therefore, we're going to give up on this as a goal. That's different. That's the recalibration process.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, we're
better off.
We're way better off.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and almost always, people's goals are actually pretty reasonable. Mm-hmm. What they think they can probably achieve, they probably can achieve. Mm-hmm. If they make very diligent efforts, when I say achieve, they can achieve, they may not get the market feedback that they expect, but their performance with respect to the problem will probably be similar to what it is that they think that they could do. Mm-hmm. They're not generally delusional. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when I see people that are tortured, that feel very bad about themselves, that are drowning in essentially self-disgust, those are people that the way to loving yourself is actually through understanding enough about these remarkably, I would say it's remarkably simple dynamics, but they are so confusing to the world of psychology that the world of psychology doesn't understand them. Okay.
And also that our modern day environment is just such a mismatch for the Stone Age environment in which we evolved, that
And
we're walking around upside down and trying to thrive and function.
absolutely, you're trying to, super well said, Chrissy, in the sense that so many things that people are wanting to achieve, that would be important for them to achieve, are actually facing a pathological modern environment. And so, for example, one thing that people are actually trying to achieve and don't know it is to recapture essentially earning esteem in the village. And the truth of the matter is, the village is fractured, and so now the energy conservation chip that is designed by nature to be looking for the richest food in the environment is also looking for what I call pseudo-esteem, looking for adulation from a bunch of people that don't even know what it is that we did, who the hell is it we are, what we can accomplish for them. We're just freaking popular. I mean, the ultimate issue is to be valued because other people value us, and we don't even know why it is that other people value us. That's pseudo-esteem. Okay.
Yeah.
i.e., I'm an influencer on Facebook or whatever the hell that is. And so so in any event, we can see that the solution to all these problems winds up trying to distill our goals back to very baseline fundamental problems of human success in a Stone Age setting. Healthy food, sleep, exercise, honesty, and trying to accomplish and do things valuable for our people, and not trying to be valuable to all people. In other words, trying to steady what we most affect, and to try to be good at what it is that we need to be good at in order to be valuable to the people that are looking for what it is that we can do for them. So that's that. It's a simple prescription, but that's how I integrate that whole discussion. I hope that makes some sense.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think that's a great place to leave it. And thank you so much for talking to us in such, rational, scientific terms that encourage us to be honest, and also not to settle for some superficial sugarcoating that may make us feel slightly better in the moment, but isn't authentic, and doesn't prompt us to be the best version of ourselves that we really want, that we all really want. So
absolutely, yes. So that's the main language of self-love. But I mean, the source of it is always going to be the same.
Right.
No matter how the chick version of this has an important angle, and that angle, that where I see the most important angle of this, is the reassurance that no matter what happens with our efforts, who we are at core is enough. That's the most fundamental, and we need to know that, and that's sometimes what somebody needs to know from us. And so that's the most fundamental self-love thing is, wait a minute, all I need to do is to be working at being an excellent version of me. That's what I need, and that's going to have to be enough. And you know what, folks? You will find that even though if you don't think that that's enough, because you are desperate in search of esteem, because that's how you're wired, the truth is that is all it is that you need. That is the literally the foundation. It is the foundation of human life satisfaction, right there.
And I think just like with getting healthy physically, I think it's once people get a taste of it for themselves, then they realize it. They may hear it from you and not quite believe it, but once they start tasting it, they realize, oh, that really is where it's at.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Dr. Lyle. Where's the best place for people to find you or seek out your help in navigating this crazy world and finding their way to true self-love?
Yeah, we're at esteemdynamics.com, myself and Dr. Jen Howk. And yeah, if you want the nicer chick version of the counsel, you go to Jen. And if you're ready for the hardcore, it's me. But it's very similar messages. We see this in, not exactly the same light, but pretty similar. And behind, I think, these little stylistic things that we're looking at.
Yes, yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, and go forth and love yourself.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Bye.